Fueled by Fear is the fourth full-length album from Wraith, a band that started out back in 2016 as more of a black speed metal band, something that was clearly influenced by Midnight and Toxic Holocaust, kind of mixing the black speed metal trend with the neo-thrash sound of things. They clearly were fans of thrash metal and the modern variations on it, but their work was not necessarily derivative, but just particularly uninteresting to me for the first couple of records. I think that there was some strong ideas, there was some it's always great to hear Motorhead influence in speed metal and thrash metal and all that, but there were a ton of bands doing this style at the time. It was pretty popular and it wasn't that interesting with so many bands doing it. And basically, by the time their third record hit, they kind of found a little bit more of their own sound. And the way I described it at the time, it was like part of the way they're kind of going towards that early 2000s Immortal sound, where it was kind of black thrash metal with a simpler style, and then there's a little bit of power trip in their sound as well. And I think that record showed me that what they were doing was more interesting than I thought it was. There was a little bit of the hardcore punk influence on there. There's a little bit of a kind of a crossover touch to it. So there was a speed metal punk in there, sure, but there was also a little bit of like nuclear assault level thrash metal as well. So it checked a couple of boxes I didn't care about too much in terms of neo thrash and all that, but I liked the way that they mixed it together on that record. Under the Chains was solid. It felt like it was coherent and cohesive, and it made their case for the band pretty well at the time. So I was looking forward to this one. And rather than hone in on everything they are at once and mesh it together into a simple record, they've kind of done the opposite with Fueled by Fear. The way that I describe it here is that they've extrapolated everything that they're into and put it into 14 songs. So it's this huge record that touches upon kind of death thrash and blackened thrash, speed metal a little bit, and they don't really go into the Midnight kind of catchier speed metal thing very much beyond the middle of the album. But there are a few songs where they make it all work together, and they introduce their more hardcore-ish, straightforward thrash metal sound on this record. Overall, that's kind of what happens when they show everything they've got. So let's cut to a song which is a fair enough example of what they're doing on this record. So the vocals are a little bit deeper. There's almost kind of a death thrash feeling to some of these songs. They're hitting those late '90s, or I'm sorry, late '80s, early '90s Sodom type grooves, which they're a little bit slower than that, but they have that hardcore-ish, hardcore punk influenced beat to it. And you start to think, are they going kind of power trip on this record? Are they going crossover thrash in general? And I can't say they're fully going there. They're not exactly pulling off Cro-Mag songs here. I think it is more interesting than the black and speed metal side of the band. And the songs that do lean in that direction, that do sound a little bit like that, are kind of cheesy. That they're not very good in the middle of the record. I think that when we get to them, it's almost like a cheesy interruption. I do think Warlord is a good song. I love the heavy metal aspect of it. I think there's a solid riff or three in there. But Ice Cold Bitch is just kind of dumb in the middle of the record. It's just kind of like, yeah, we still do this, but it's kind of cheesy. It doesn't really fit on the record. But if you look back to the precedents of 1985 to 1998 in terms of thrash metal, there were plenty of records that were just cutting into a Motorhead song in the middle of a record. So this is not out of character for thrash metal in general, and it doesn't really damage the record in any way. It shows a little bit more range, and I think that was what this record was aiming for, is to get into like 8 different modes and show us everything they can do. And they do so pretty well. I think that the themes of the record are pretty straightforward. It is all pretty classic when you think about it long enough. And what I say here, and I've said this many times before, it's not that deep. The appeal of this record is very straightforward, and the message of it is as well. And so don't get too hung up on expecting a black speed metal record. Think of it more as like this is just a thrash metal record with a lot of punk influence that is modern, and it has riffs. I wouldn't say that they're deeply repetitive, and a lot of these motifs or shapes on the guitar repeat themselves throughout the record. There are 14 songs here, and they do kind of run out of rhythmic ideas, but it doesn't necessarily hurt the replay value of the record. The reason I'm talking about it is because I left it on repeat for hours and hours at a time, and enjoyed the sort of firestorm that it creates. I think that this is a new something new from Wraith, and it's interesting that they pulled it out of themselves, trying to represent themselves as best as possible. That's a moderately high recommendation for me. I think that they could go a little bit further with their songwriting and maybe write less songs on the next record, but overall, I think this was a positive shift in terms of style. I think the production values are very strong, and for this type of band, it's all very appropriate. Check that out for yourself. It released on June 28th, that is today, and read my review for more of my thoughts.